1984 by James Orwell. This is one of the most banned books of all time, a dystopian fiction. Orwell wrote 1984 to have the reader experience the terrifying possibilities of totalitarianism. Readers see the world through the eyes of Winston, who rebels against the system. The novel's important themes include controlling the mind through language, intimidation, and the importance of knowing one's history. Simi works as the minister of truth. He's one of the characters here, creating a new dictionary of language approved by the party. "How is the dictionary getting on?" said Winston. "Slowly," said Simi. "I'm on the adjectives. It's fascinating. The 11th edition is the definitive edition," he said. "We're getting the language into its final shape, the shape it's going to have when nobody speaks anything else. When we're finished with it, people like you will have to learn language all over. You think, I dare say, that our chief job is inventing new words, but not a bit. We're destroying words, scores of them, hundreds of them every day. We're cutting the language down to the bone. It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage is in the verbs and adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns that can be got rid of as well. It isn't only synonyms, there are also those antonyms. After all, what justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for instance. If you have a word like good, what need is there for a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well. Better because it's the exact opposite, which the other is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is there in having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent and splendid and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning. Double plus good if you want something stronger still. 1984 is listed as the most frequently banned book in the United States. The theme of the book is the dangers of authoritarianism. However, the message has been misunderstood by some as being pro-communist. Also banned for sexually explicit content and depictions of torture. This ends our reading. And so we would sing Amazing Grace, which also really should be banned. Because not only does it come from someone who decided that slavery, which he had been involved with enslaving people, was not good, so we're dealing with race, but also it was chosen by the Iroquois people, given their language, and they sang it as they walked on the Trail of Tears. History. It was also sung in the civil rights movement. We are going to sing a hymn that should be banned.
Thank you.
Oh, it was so much fun to prepare this service. This week, a video of a nationally known novelist, Ann Patchett, showed up in my Facebook account. She may have been in yours too. She's standing in front of the shelves of brightly colored books in her independent bookstore, and she's beaming. Her eyes are sparkling, and with a voice that's just shy of laughter, she's just really holding it in. She says, "It's a pretty big day for me personally." You wonder, what? Another bestseller? An award? Oh, I just got a call that 2 of my novels have been banned in Orange County, Florida school system. And she is celebrating. With mock seriousness, she says, "Be careful. Don't read my books." For an increasing number of authors like Ann Patchett, being a banned author is becoming a badge of honor. However, book banning is a sign of difficulties for democracy and the freedom of speech. One characteristic that's found in all countries who have moved towards authoritarianism is an effort to control publications, books, any form of the written word, and of course it goes beyond that, but we're talking about books today. In Nazi-controlled Germany, 25,000 un-German books were burned in a public ritual on this one day, May 10th, 1933, and children and youth were enlisted to find the books throughout their communities. That's very particular, isn't it? Some of the novel, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, takes place in Paris shortly after the beginning of the Nazi occupation of France. The parents of a wealthy French family cooperate with the Nazis in every way, even sending their son to a youth camp where he trains to fight against the Allies. Even with their allegiance to the Nazis, they commit one act of personal resistance we are made aware of in the book. They hide a forbidden American book, Audubon's Bird Illustrations, where only members of the family can find it. If it had been found, it could mean death for everyone in the family. And the art was so beautiful, they could part with their son. They did not part with this book. Think about that. When the son is allowed a home visit from the training camp, he brings a friend who is the narrator of the book with him, and the son risks the welfare of his whole family by showing this treasure to his friend, pleading with his friend then to keep the secret of its existence. He just felt compelled to show his friend this precious thing, but please, please don't tell anyone you have seen it here. And he returns the book to its hiding place. And at the end of the novel, the Nazi army has left the city, and the son has been returned to his parents. And because of the son's injuries, his cognitive ability is minimal. He is no longer able to speak or draw the birds he once identified just by seeing their flight or hearing their song. Audubon's masterpiece book of illustrations at this point is no longer hidden. They show it to him, hoping that he'll recognize the drawings of what he once loved and engage with them, engage with the book. But it's not possible. What a powerful story within that story. The pattern of restricting the written word and a rise in authoritarianism is found in countries across the globe. China's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s and 1970s with Mao Zedong. In Serbia in 1992, it's estimated that 2 million books were burned by nationalists. In Iraq in 2015, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria burned down the Mosul University Library with over 1 million resources, and they are now doing their best to recover as much as they can. The restriction, the destruction of books increases whenever a government or a leader with power wants to dictate the thoughts of the population. This is always about control. Unitarians and Universalists have been cast out or have died for what they published under our name. And this morning I'm going to offer you two stories from our past. One Unitarian story is from the long ago, and I'm going to touch on that relatively briefly. And the second is more closely tied to the book banning that's increasingly, very dramatically a part of our lives today. It's been said that Unitarian Universalists are people of the banned book. May I be so guilty. Michael Servetus lived in the 1500s, so I'm going way back. In the cultural centers of Europe, there was a battle between the established Catholic Church and emerging faiths, the Protestant, the protest churches. Martin Luther and John Calvin are the most widely known reformers, but there were others. There were many others, including Michael Servetus, the person Unitarians claim as a part of our heritage. Servetus was brilliant. He was not wise. A gifted student of languages, he read ancient sources of the biblical text, which is also a banned book, by the way. In his studies, he found no evidence of the Trinity, thus Unitarian, one God. God's essence being divided into three identities is the Trinity. Servetus had a fierce rivalry with Calvin, and to make his point, this is where he was not wise, he took Calvin's book on theology and wrote personal insults in the margins, calling him an idiot, a simpleton, referring to Calvin's conclusions as vomit. And he sent it back to Calvin. I don't know what he thought Calvin was going to do with this. To say that Servetus's ideas were not well received by any established churches or respected leaders is an understatement. Both Catholic and Protestant leaders demanded his capture and his execution. He was not popular. The life of Servetus unfolded with all the drama of an Amazon Prime thriller. He was caught, he escaped, and was burned in effigy. He changed his identity. He changed professions. He went into hiding. He returned and revealed his identity, fool, and couldn't resist taunting his enemies. He was not wise, as I said, and he was caught again. Being a heretic and writing books to spread heresy was considered one of the worst possible crimes because people really believed they were trying to figure out how would they not go to hell. So, heaven and hell is very real for people at that time and for some people today. So you're messing with somebody's soul. For that reason, and also because he had made Calvin so angry, the pyre for Servetus's execution was built from newly cut and slow-burning branches. Every copy of his book that could be found was used as fuel around his feet. A copy was strapped to his arm. And every important religious and government leader was present for this execution. It was a big event. The only person who was missing was John Calvin, who was the person, the reason he was there. During this time, religious book burnings were common. Whatever leaders had the ability to do so, they burned the books of the opposition, and sometimes the person. But ideas are not burned with the person. Neither are they burned with the books. Everyone wants what is denied. Why is the written word, why are books so intimidating? Because what we read shapes our thoughts. It shapes who we become. What is read by society influences how groups of people think and informs the character of a society. There are other Unitarian or Universalist examples of printing presses that are smashed, books being distributed by horseback, and people losing their lives or being exiled for publications. Every case of book banning I found in our religious tradition is because the content encouraged openness to the stranger, a God that is loving and not judging, and narrowing the distance between, historically, a divine Jesus and an everyday human being. Or, if you prefer, seeing the potential divine in every human being. All these incredibly dangerous ideas, beware. Fast forward hundreds of years to the 1820s in the United States, years leading up to the Civil War. This is an example that more closely parallels our time today. A popular literary magazine in New England challenged local writers to submit stories using two subjects. It's like a puzzle. They get two subjects: the colonial history of America, and the second was Native American life. Those were the two pieces of the puzzle. 22-year-old Unitarian Lydia Maria Child answered the challenge, but probably in a way they had not anticipated. She created the story of an interracial marriage, this is 1820s, between a Puritan woman, there's the colonial history, and a First Nation man living in Salem, Massachusetts. I can guarantee that the people running that publication did not anticipate this story. The critics condemned the storyline as being in very bad taste. Apparently that is a really bad thing to say. So now when we think about the comments that come underneath an article that you just really shouldn't read, what they said in the 1820s was it was in very bad taste. So immediately she became a celebrity. Their condemnation launched her writing career that focused on racial justice, women's rights, and this was amazing to me, her disagreement with American expansionism. Wow. Research about the history of book banning in the United States, everything I read kept leading me back to this periodical, the Juvenile Miscellany. It was a periodical written for children in those years leading up to the Civil War, and she was the main contributor. And when other writers signed on to write in the publication, she became the editor as well. She was aware that the periodical was read by the rich and respectable families of the Boston area. I will tell you that many of them were Unitarians, not all. The Juvenile Miscellany was extremely popular with children, and they'd wait on the front steps of their homes for the mail carrier to come. And you could, whoever got it first, all the kids would rush there and they would surround them to read this. So it was very popular. From the very beginning, Lydia Maria Child's viewpoints didn't necessarily align with the culture of the families who enthusiastically read it. This is the beginning of the conundrum. The main characters of the juvenile found in the Juvenile Miscellany were not replicas of the parents who purchased the journal. The children in the stories were allies of marginalized groups, First Nations people, immigrants, free people of color, and women. This is in 1829. I keep saying 1929 because I can't quite believe it. Her stories encouraged empathy with those who were outside the children's social sphere, In addition, her writing assumed children were capable of understanding a wide scope and depth of learning. I found an early copy of Miscellany online, and the first chapter is understanding the ways Chinese children play. This is 1829. An admiration for Chinese education, explaining Chinese family customs, the amazing difficulty of their written language that it would take a non-Chinese person 30 years to join. There were also chapters in the publication about science and zoology. There was the whole life of Mozart. Her fictional stories often gave the children a moral dilemma and encouraged them to come to their own conclusion, independent of what their parents might think. You can see how dangerous this is becoming. It's freeing, it's dangerous. In the years leading up to the Civil War, children's books rarely included the topic of slavery or the lives of enslaved people. It was seen as emotionally inappropriate for children, and I would say probably for their parents. It was believed that children should be shielded from controversies or painful events. The truth is that important moral growth happens when we are faced with difficult, uncomfortable dilemmas, whether in print or in real life. By the 1830s, Lydia Child and other contributors of the juvenile miscellany included an increasing number of topics that made the parents uncomfortable. These publications weren't destroyed in public fires. No centralized authority banned them. The wealthy, educated New England, probably Unitarian subscribers, simply abandoned the magazine and removed its influence from their homes. The juvenile miscellany folded within 18 months. In the 1830s, it was the parents, the consumers, who enacted the ban. Starting from the 1800s to today, one of the most frequently used reasons for banning a publication is that the subject is not emotionally appropriate for children, youth, or not appropriate moral perspective to be in the public sphere. Today, parents continue to be the ones to agitate for books to be banned from schools and increasingly from public libraries. Parents and their organizations pressure publishers to steer clear of specific authors or topics. There are many states, but the primary ones are Texas, Florida, Missouri, Utah. Moms for Liberty have recently been in Davis. The settlement happened this week for an altercation that happened at a meeting in a library, and the court decided on the side of the Moms for Davis for the right to speak at a gathering, the freedom of speech. It doesn't mean they condoned the reasons, but they said you cannot stop speech in a public place like a library. It's very much same issues alive today. The Seventh Wish is a banned book written by Kate Messner. It's contemporary. After publishing this book, Messner received several messages from librarians and parents who were concerned about the book's appropriateness. The older sibling in this book of the main character is grappling with addiction. And one elementary school librarian explained why she would not put the book on the library's shelves. For now, she said, I just need the 10 and 11-year-olds' biggest worry to be about friendships, summer camp, and maybe their first pimple or two. Just to say, the American Library Association says that there is a 65% increase in book banning titles Between 2022 and 2023, there are 4,240 books banned, or in the works to request that they be banned. My question is, how do children come to understand the addiction that they very well may witness in their own family or among their friends or themselves? Limiting the kind of life that's portrayed in books shows an idealized American childhood that has rarely, if ever, existed. I just mentioned this unprecedented increase of book banning. And what are the topics that would make a book be banned? This is from the American Libraries Association Office for Intellectual Freedom. It has a lot to do with diversity, but here's what they say about diversity. A story with characters that are non-white. Basically, any themes about sexuality, focusing on themes of gender fluid or transgender issues, anything LGBTQI, anything with sexuality, people living with disabilities, issues of race or racism, religion, especially faiths that are not mainline conservative Christian, including religious issues around the Holocaust, people living with mental illness, any non-Western settings, Western being interpreted as the United States, and any fiction or nonfiction that includes a historical perspective that is not white, Northern, European, or that portrays the United States as uniformly a positive force in the world. There are a lot of banned books out there. Being willing to embrace the diversity on those things, on the banned books list, I believe is central to the soul of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. If we believe that love is at the center of our existence, a hard love, a tough love, a difficult love, a conflicting love, but love, we need to read things that show us that it's possible to be seen and known. When Oprah Winfrey wrote the foreword to The Bluest Eye, Winfrey was 15 years old and she read the book and she said, "Here was a book that revealed insights and feelings I had never been able to articulate. It was as if her heart spilled out onto the page. She gave the book to everyone she met, hoping that they would read it and understand her." How many other women of color, how many other women read Maya Angelou's autobiography and felt seen, heard, acknowledged? If we're going to live with love and we're going to read books that show it, we should read things that grow our capacity to empathize with others who do not share our narrow life experience. Each one of us has kind of a narrow life experience. David Sedaris said a good book would take me out of myself and then stuff me back in, outsized now and uneasy with the fit. If I'm going to live with love, I'm going to read books that add historical perspective, bringing truth that has been hidden or silenced by a white Northern European historian. Our understanding of humanity is more complete when we hear from First Nations people, from those who were enslaved, from Japanese Americans, from undocumented people. So many people. So I want to know, what's on your bookshelf? What's on your Kindle? What are your podcasts? Your bedside table reading stack, you know, the one that keeps getting bigger. What would be banned in your home? What are you reading that would shape who you will become, to be open to the stranger, to see the divine in others and yourself? What are you reading that would show curiosity, your hunger to understand more and more completely. What are you reading that's dangerous? So, what you have here in front of you is a small altar, and we are going to go right to that. This is what I call a reverse offering, because I want you to take something. And the book on the top up here is a book called Wonder, about a child, a young person with a facial deformity. Highly banned. The Kite Runner is here. We have some other, the 1619 Project, some other books. Jazz, I Hope Will Go Home with Somebody. And Maus, M-A-U-S, is one of the top banned books. That's a graphic novel. It's like in cartoon form. Very famous. I didn't know about it until this sermon. And I was able to get these books online at a used, for a used rate. They're all in great shape. And I hope that you will take them and will pass them on to others. There are several copies of Maus, M-A-U-S. There are stickers that you can put anywhere you want that says read banned books. There are 20 of those. And there are lists of the top banned books in 2023. And then below that, there's about another 30 that you can look at. So I invite you to come forward and to take what you'd like, and let there be nothing left in the reversed offering today. So please take and live dangerously.